joining with us. Okay, yes, we're glad that folks can be joining with us tonight. Welcome. This is our Tuesday night meeting of the Stop LAPD Spying Coalition. This is the fourth Tuesday of the month, so this is our fight against data-driven policing. My name is Tiff. I use they and them pronouns, and I'm one of the coordinators of this fight against data-driven policing, a member of the Stop LAPD Spying Coalition. If folks do want to say hi, you're welcome to use the chat feature at any time. If you want to, for any reason, really, drop your name in the chat, say anything about yourself, share pronouns. And so essentially, we'll just go over what we're going to be talking about today. Oh, and I also want to add that this is our fourth Tuesday of the night meeting. We also have additional coalition meetings folks may be aware of already on the first Tuesday of the month. We have the gender and sexuality group. So that looks at policing and surveillance through the lens of gender and sexuality. And welcome, Andrew, and to all of your family members. Then on the second Tuesday of the month, at the same time, we have our fight against the war on youth. On the third Tuesday, we have our general coalition meeting. And then on the fourth Tuesday is the fight against data-driven policing. All of these meetings are open and folks are welcome to join any of those. And so this week, we are going to be continuing a conversation that we started actually a while ago. It's going to be centering around our conversation around our report that we actually put out this past November. And maybe like are folks able to, I think most of the folks here are pretty familiar with that report. Folks who perhaps are newer to the space, I'm not sure if you've had a chance to take a look at that, but welcome from Montreal. And but you can take a look at that report on automatingbanishment.org. And so we're going to be continuing our conversation around that report today. We're going to be looking at section 5 of the report that we actually started that conversation last week. We were joined then by Paula Miner with Black Lives Matter LA. And this week we're excited to be joined by, we hope, Zarita Jones, who is an organizer and a resident in the Baldwin Hills area neighborhood. And so we're excited about that. We're going to keep having that conversation about the report. Then in the second half of the meeting, we're going to move into getting some updates from at least one of our working groups. We do have a number of different working groups. We'll be kind of focusing on one of those today and sharing an update of some of the work that's been done, sharing a zine that was created by folks. And then we'll also be getting an update from Shakira as well about one of the reforms in policing that is being developed this year that we're going to be kind of rallying folks around and pushing back against. So that's an overview of the agenda. And any questions so far? Thank you, Hamid. So Hamid is sharing that link to the report. All right, folks. So I think we'll keep it moving. Essentially what we'll do now is usually what we do before kind of diving into the discussion of the particular section is we just give a brief overview of kind of the report, the sections of the report that we've covered so far. So essentially automating banishment, the report that was released, this is a report that builds on something that we released in 2018 before the bullet hits the body. And what we did in that first report is we looked at predictive policing in Los Angeles used by LAPD. And we delved into the specifics of those predictive policing programs and how those data-driven programs were used to target folks. With automating banishment, we built on that and started looking at how they were implemented in different areas with a particular focus on Skid Row and also South Central Los Angeles, and looked at what is the connection between the use of these data-driven programs and displacement and eviction, and essentially, ultimately the banishment of folks from entire areas. So that's what we took a look at. Again, we'll be looking more at section 5 today. And yeah, I think what we'll do now is we will just kind of do a little go around. We'll have folks kind of share a little bit about each of the sections that we've gone through so far. And I will pause and take a drink of water and also just see also if folks have any questions on that so far before we start just doing a real quick review of some of those different sections. But did folks have any questions or comments so far? All right, okay, so we'll keep going. And yeah, Hamid, did you want to give us a little bit about what section 1 of the report was about?
Yeah, thank you, Tiff, and welcome everybody. So section 1 basically lays out, just the history, and it's titled "Not a Moment in Time," but a continuation of history. And this is very much rooted in the guiding values for the coalition when we first came together about 11 years ago. That how are we looking at the historic realities and looking at it in the current context as well, and what's that trajectory like that helps us better understand what the impact that we see now in the police state and the violence that is going on, what has been the process over time. And for the purposes of the report, particularly, our grounding for this report is also looking at settler colonialism, that how settler colonialism is very alive and well, how settler colonialism laid the groundwork for not only enslavement and genocide, but even mass removal and banishment of many people. So in that vein, when we look at the relationship, as Tiff was saying, between data-driven policing and gentrification and displacement, it is critical that we take a look back and draw parallels, which are very real. I mean, some of the things that we lift in this report is that just as we now speak about mass incarceration and looking at the history of enslavement, we can't be not looking at the history of settler colonialism, the deployment of U.S. Army at the time as frontline troops for removing Native folks from land and opening it up for white settlers and all of that. So similarly, what is the relationship between law enforcement currently and the major developments that are going on? And it's right there in front of us. Mass homelessness, people can't afford rents, hardly affordable at all. People living in their cars, but at the same time, there's a lot of wealth that is being made as well. So that's what that really covers. Thank you, Tiff.
Yeah, thank you so much, Hamid. And then for section 2, essentially this is where section 2 of the report is where we start talking about the apparatus of data-driven policing in Los Angeles and getting folks familiar with that. And because we're in the different sections, we then go on and talk about how that is applied in different ways specifically. So we talk more about what is that technological framework of data-driven policing, and also how it has been expanded and kind of what has that political framing and climate been in which it has expanded and how it has been justified. We talk about the role of Bill Bratton in that. He was LAPD's police chief for a certain period of time, and just a deeply, deeply anti-Black individual who essentially used a lot of these technologies and really tested them on poor communities, on Black communities, on the Skid Row communities, and really played a big role in expanding that, also implementing broken windows policing, a lot of the things that are very much still championed by LAPD today. So we talk about that kind of that process and some of that framework that still exists today. We also get a bit more into the specifics again of the predictive policing programs, Operation Laser, that targeted and criminalized people and locations using data and kind of in these programs that were essentially made up by so-called academics and LAPD to justify the targeting of folks, the targeting of Black communities. We also talk about programs like CNAP, which is the Citywide Nuisance Abatement Program that was established in 1997. And this is essentially a collaboration between 5 city agencies. It's LAPD, the City Attorney's Office, the Department of Building and Planning, and two others, the Department of Building and Safety and the Housing Department. And these 5 agencies collaborate to have locations deemed a nuisance, again, based on the parameters that they decide, and fed by, informed by information that is gathered by LAPD on that location. And that's something that we'll be talking a bit more about today. So we talk about all of that in section 2, kind of these programs and apparatus that are used to target folks. And then from that, we go into section 3. And Mamta, did you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Mamta Aluwalia with the coalition. So section 3 was called capitalist real estate and capitalist crisis. And as Tiff was discussing in section 2, we talked about how data-driven policing programs kind of emerged in the context of reforms that were enacted following the consent decree in Los Angeles, and also how the increased surveillance powers and militarization of LAPD in the wake of 9/11 allowed for all this warehousing of data and data sharing between local and federal entities. And so we kind of following that trajectory, in section 3, we looked at the 2008 foreclosure crisis and how that combined with the history of data-driven policing and the enactment of some of these programs that Tiff described, how real estate development, capitalist crisis, and policing then kind of came together in this moment to perpetuate the legacy of colonial violence and conquest through the theft of land, which is sort of fundamental to the settler colonial state, which is the divestment of communities of color from their homes and land, and for the gain of private capital and and corporations. So in that section, in section 3, we looked at how these how some of the how basically there was a trend towards the consolidation of rental housing, particularly in the Crenshaw corridor in South Central Los Angeles, from family-owned units into the hands of individual investors, and kind of how that shift from rental housing and ownership just kind of transformed that area. And we looked at a map that kind of showed the corporate takeover in that Crenshaw corridor, and how the majority of the parcels, or more than half the parcels, were corporate owned by the end of the sort of ravages of 2008. And we also, Tiff mentioned CNAP a little bit, but we also looked at how banishment from land is enacted through the use of legal vehicles, and the combination of criminal and civil law, in particular these nuisance lawsuits, which targeted primarily poor and Black neighborhoods, as well as mainly residential properties, to condemn them for various so-called violations or nuisance generating activities. And so in this way also, and CNAP, we did discuss CNAP in this section. We kind of showed the communications that some of the city attorneys who were part of this program, which was started in the late 1990s, I think 1997, how basically this was sort of another instrument by which policing sort of targeted communities to make way for gentrification. And CNAP prosecutors were, the emails that were included in this report that we reference in this report show that the CNAP prosecutors were coordinating with local and federal law enforcement through these fusion centers, which operate both on the state and the local level in Los Angeles. let's see. And then we also talked about bids in this section, which is the business improvement districts, and kind of how they act at the behest of landlords and property owners to target unhoused folks and people of color in these neighborhoods. So basically, we looked at kind of like the relationship of Laser, CNAP, the City Nuisance Abatement Program, bids, the business improvement districts, certain real estate developers like Haroni and the SIM group, and how and the sort of collaboration, complicity of nonprofits like Brilliant Corners, who help these corporations kind of get, state subsidized state subsidies to provide for low-income housing, eventually phasing them out while underwriting kind of the cost of building an improvement of properties. So yeah, I think that's it. Yeah.
Awesome, Mamta. Thank you so much for that update. You have a great background, by the way. It's very relaxing. And then next we have section 4, and that was looking at the policing of Skid Row. Shakira, did you want to share a little bit about that one?
Sure. Yeah. So that section, I think, similar to the one we're talking about today, is like kind of applying what we kind of introduced and analyzed in these previous sections about the history and then the components of the programs and then all the kind of relationships to developers and to real estate, applying those to kind of two communities that we've been organizing in and have a lot of relationships in. So the first one is Skid Row, which is where the coalition has long been based and has long been organizing against surveillance. And so we know of Skid Row and have long known of it as a place where LAPD and the city have always tested kind of new forms of surveillance and policing, and even a lot of these kind of early ingredients of data-driven policing that that Tiff was talking about the stuff that was introduced by Chief Bratton, like kind of the whole approach of broken windows policing. A lot of this surveillance infrastructure was first introduced in Skid Row and tested there. So the story that we kind of uncovered about Skid Row, a couple of things. One is kind of looking at how Skid Row, which is again, community of largely Black and brown, a lot of unhoused people, a lot of low-income, extremely low-income people living in single-room occupancy hotels. How over time, data-driven policing and data has been used to kind of create like a digital border around Skid Row, almost like a wall or a buffer that's used to contain the population of Skid Row, to keep them, contained in that area and not kind of, with this kind of almost like wall separating them from kind of the gentrifying parts of downtown that are, parts like sort of right on the other side of Main Street, for example, on one edge. So that's one aspect of it. And then also kind of tracking the role of data-driven policing in also like kind of laying the groundwork for real estate developers and gentrifiers to kind of close in on Skid Row. And the way we kind of talk about that is, in the same way that we know that policing and data have always been a part of kind of extraction and conquest of communities, that same extraction, even you can see the dynamics of that in Skid Row, even though, extraction here doesn't necessarily mean taking taking wages from people or taking kind of fines or fees from people in that way, but literally taking the land that's beneath their feet. Like literally the reason that all of these developers are now able to extremely valuable kind of property values is primarily because of all the neglect and the deprivation that the community faced from the state over the years, a lot of it through policing. And so now that kind of creates the conditions in which the state is now literally using data-driven policing, marking specific intersections and locations in Skid Row that are also the exact targets. They're also the exact places where, for example, protections for low-income housing are being threatened and are going to be turned in the city's new zoning plan into permission for market rate housing, or that are being targeted for these kind of redevelopment projects that will displace the population there and displace the affordable housing there. So yeah, so we kind of are telling the story of how data-driven policing is really hand in hand with that kind of, one, containment of Skid Row, and two, kind of redevelopment and extraction of the community's wealth in Skid Row.
Awesome. Thank you, folks, so much for these overviews. Yeah, so that's those are the first 4 sections, and we're going to next be handing it over to Matios to talk about section 5. I did just want to pause for a moment, though, and just check in with folks, because we do have just a small group of us here today. If folks feel comfortable, perhaps maybe just sharing a little about, like, is this new information? Is this I think a few folks maybe are new here to a coalition meeting for the first time. So if you feel comfortable, maybe just saying a little about, like, maybe what brought you in, or any familiarity with all of this tons of information that we're talking through. Or so I'll just pause and see if anyone wants to share. It's also okay if you don't. Oh.
Sorry, it's the toddler of it all. Hi, yes, I think I met Matios at a Echo Park Lake event where we were, like, scouting for cameras that the LAPD had said was there. Who knows how many of them are actually there and on, but yeah, even just hearing the rundown, a lot of this is the way I would describe it is like muscle and fiber on, like, the skeleton of information I already knew, but, like, hearing, like, some of the more detail on how it's being enacted. And then I didn't know this report existed, so I'm excited to look into this. I had find out more about you through the fundraiser with the band recently, and then have been trying to pay attention since. So actually just put up a poster of yours from the bullet, before the bullet hits the body. So it's funny to hear that reference today. So that's why I'm here, and I wanted to join. It's hard to find time with little chaos monster, but trying to join when I can. So
Yeah, thanks so much. Welcome, Andrew. Anyone else want to check in or share anything? Okay.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, please go ahead, Nee.
sorry, Tiff. Yeah, I just wanted to add really quickly, like, I think that I like going into it, right, and seeing, like, the work that folks in the community kind of put together and like explained. I feel like theoretically, like, and like, as someone that has gone through, like, an eviction process, like, that police show up, that, like, police are involved, but I think it's harder, and it's harder to name, like, the different ways, and, like, the secretive ways, or, like, not like only them showing up and locking folks out for evictions. But I feel like the being able to, like, have that named, and to, like, know, like, the different ways that, like, policing is, like, integral to, like, the banishment of folks in the community, the evictions, and, like, the just, like, the entire role, and the architecture, really, that expands just beyond policing, but the state as well, who props it up. So I feel like the report definitely, it helps with, like, kind of being able to better name that. And so just those were my initial thoughts, in, like, even considering, like, what are the different ways in which policing shows up, and then the different programs as well, because, like, the different names, the different reforms as well. So definitely thankful for, like, all the work that folks put in to, like, both uncover this, and as well to continue to talk about the, like, all the sneaky ways that those kind of partnerships exist.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for that, Nee. Any other questions or thoughts from folks so far? All right, so, okay, so I think we'll go ahead and get started on section 5. And again, this is a continuation of that section. I think we were expecting, we were hoping that we would be joined by someone from the community, and it looks like that won't be able to happen, which is okay. I think we'll just kind of readjust. And Matios, I'm not sure if we just kind of want to go through this section and maybe hit on like, because essentially it's just like, what are some of the key points of that, and like sharing that with folks, or what are your thoughts on?
Yeah, that could be cool. We can kind of go over it together. Hey, folks, my name is Matios. I use he, him pronouns with the Stop LAPD Spying Coalition. And we're meant to be joined by Zarita Jones, who's an incredible housing organizer with the Baldwin Hills Crenshaw chapter of Latu, also with Downtown Crenshaw Rising. And so hopefully they can still tune in and join us, and they'll have some valuable insights. But in the meantime, we can plug ahead. And so this is the second half of our conversation on part 5, which deals with racial terror and white wealth in South Central Los Angeles. And as Tiff was saying earlier, last week we were joined by Paula Miner, Mama Paula, as I call her, of BLMLA, in talking about these LAPD predictive policing programs, the flooding of South Central police officers, and what that kind of manifested itself as for the Black community, the real violence and harassment that we felt and we experienced, and the banishment that ensued because of that. And in talking about that, one of the things we highlighted was Nipsey Hussle and his marathon store. Nipsey's marathon store was what's called an opportunity zone, which was a federally incentivized area to invest in. And Nipsey had invested into his neighborhood, which had been designated an opportunity zone, with the hopes of kind of building Black autonomy and Black wealth, right? And he, you know, I think it's our analysis that he was targeted for that reason, by designating his store an anchor point. And yeah, does anybody want to give a quick recap on laser zones and anchor points, just so folks know? I can just say it very quickly.
Yeah, I can do that if that's okay. Yeah, so essentially when we're talking about like looking at how Operation Laser was functioning and being used in different neighborhoods and being used in South Central is where we're looking at specifically. Operation Laser was a program it's a predictive policing program. It was created by LAPD and also their consultant that they partner with frequently called JSS, Justice and Security Strategies. And they essentially created this so-called predictive policing program that they claimed would use crime data. So they would decide what data they would use to make this determination. They used crime data to make decisions about which people were most criminal and which locations were most criminal. And once they made this judgment, they designated those areas as laser zones. Those are kind of larger areas of land. And when we're looking at South Central, there was a laser zone in the Slauson and Crenshaw area. In the Crenshaw corridor, there were a number of laser zones in the Crenshaw corridor. And again, if folks go to the website automatingbanishment.org, you can actually take a look at the interactive map and see where laser zones existed in the city. And this was a program that was shut down in 2019, and that was due to a lot of what we exposed here in this group and the community demands that it be shut down. But essentially, so the laser zones were these areas that were deemed to be places that crime was going to occur. And so what happened is then patrols were assigned to those areas. Additional surveillance was added to those areas. They were essentially bombarded with all of these different types of policing tactics, all of the different, vice squads, the gang units, patrol units, community policing. They had all of these different tactics, CNAP as well. So the city attorney was in on that as well, targeting these areas, essentially trying to disrupt what was going on there. And to make it harder for folks essentially to live there, to exist there, all again under this notion that these were criminal areas. And they, with people, they essentially did something similar in terms of like they deemed a person as to be most criminal, or that they were likely to commit crime in the future. So they were saying, well, we'll follow these people and we'll make sure that that we're ready to catch them if they're going to commit crime, or we'll actually, something that was revealed is that they were, planning to arrest people even before they committed a crime. And that was something that they expressed in internal emails. So that's what a laser zone is. The person that was targeted was called a chronic offender, and then anchor points. That was another term that Matios used. The anchor point is a location within a laser zone that was kind of a more specific location. That again was it was called an anchor point because it was supposed to be an anchor for crime. It was supposed to have a high association with crime. And again, this was something that was decided by LAPD. And when we're talking about Nipsey Hussle, we found out like after, I think it came out, well, I think it came to the attention of this group after Nipsey was actually killed, that store had been under investigation by the city attorney's office, by LAPD. It had been targeted for a CNAP. And from our understanding, from the documents that we'd been getting from LAPD, we understood that intersection had been designated an anchor point. It had been designated a laser zone as well. And so that was a highly policed area. It was highly targeted. And so that was kind of the basis around why we started even looking into this, and kind of the development of that section. So I went off a bit there, but that's what an anchor point and a laser zone is. Do folks have questions on any of that?
Yeah, thank you so much, Tiff. No, that's super helpful. And so yeah, kind of in understanding, Nipsey being targeted for opening up this store, his store being designated an anchor point. We kind of move on to look at these opportunity zones a little more closely, and they were signed into law in 2017. And we shift our focus onto, in the report, onto the CIM group, which came up recently. I think Manta brought them up, and just how they were kind of utilizing opportunity zones. And I think TIFF in their research actually uncovered documents that actually showed CIM discussing an opportunity zone fund, and even highlighting and marking certain places, as opportunity zones within a presentation. And I can put up an image of that on the report. And this is particularly interesting because, as the report states, they'd be competing with folks like Nipsey, community members like Nipsey Hussle, who are trying to, cultivate or nurture their own communities for investment in these areas. And it's with that understanding and that framing that we then look at their relationship with the LAPD and how they've grown that relationship with the LAPD. And Mamta, if you're available, or even Shakir, would anybody be willing to talk about how CIM kind of comes up in part 3 with Shalkuba and the CNAPs?
Yeah, I can jump in here. Yeah, I mean, so like you see here, the CIM owns all, it's a large, I think one of the country's largest kind of commercial real estate developers, particularly targeting gentrifying neighborhoods. I mean, you can see right there, if you kind of, recognize the map of LA, right there below the 10, kind of along West Adams, ton of those properties, a bunch of stuff in downtown, a bunch of stuff in Hollywood. And right there along in West Adams, along West Adams Boulevard and Jefferson Boulevard and stuff, one of the things that we uncovered and that we talk about in part 3 is how literally this co-founder of CIM group, Shalkuba, shows up in some of the legal records related to CNAP targeting of a liquor store where this called Holiday Liquors, and it's just, LAPD or the city attorney had been prosecuting it as a nuisance. And during the testimony of the case, it came out the owner of the building, or the owner of the liquor store, was saying that at the same time that he was being targeted by police and by the city attorney, and the LAPD was trying to, use the CNAP case to install a bunch of surveillance, like in cameras and stuff around the building. At the same time that he was facing that, they were clearly kind of in communication with the founder of CIM Group, who was trying to make an offer on that lot, obviously to buy it for, to turn it into some, whatever gentrified thing. So yeah, that was just kind of a clear example that we saw, like in the records of actually one of these cases, of how at the same time, because basically the CNAP case is like targeting the landowner or the tenant and trying to say, here's all the stuff you need to do, here's all this, or we're going to kind of make life harder for you. And oftentimes it's a lot easier for the person to just sell the property. And that's kind of how that pressure comes. And yeah, we see that in a lot of places.
Yeah, thank you, Shakir. And, we saw this tactic come into play, or even in that section, they bring up how Chesapeake Apartments, which is where Zarita Jones, who hopefully can still join us, lives, was also targeted for CNAP. And there it was, the objective was like the implementation of all the surveillance equipment that went straight to the LAPD, that fed straight to the LAPD, the criminalization of, Zarita and her family members. So again, with this banishment in mind. And so the report kind of digs a little deeper to kind of find the tie-ins or the ties CIM Group has with the LAPD. Even looking at like one of the principals at CIM, Monica Yamada, who liaises with LAPD, but also has ties to a group called the Hollywood Property Owners Alliance, which oversaw 2 bids. So we see a clear concerted effort on that end to push people out. And let's just take a break there to see if folks have any questions about any of that. And Mamta's written here, Cuba has been called Hollywood's richest slumlord, firm worth over 30 billion. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Oh, go ahead, please.
I think, was someone else about to jump in? Did I hear someone else? Also, welcome. We see we have someone on the phone joining. Welcome to the conversation.
We have to head out for dinner time, but thank you all and hopefully we'll be able to join more organized next Tuesday.
Definitely. And check out the website for upcoming meetings. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to, we always love when youth joins. But yeah, I just wanted to call out, just when we're talking about CIM Group as well, it was interesting, just while we were like researching for this report, kind of making that connection that CIM Group had associations with 2 different malls that had LAPD substations. So the Crenshaw Mall, which we talk about in some detail in this section. And so that was the Crenshaw Mall, Crenshaw Baldwin Hills Mall, was a laser zone and had various anchor points around the perimeter as well. That was heavily policed, and that had an LAPD substation located within it. That was a CIM Group attempted to purchase that mall at one point, and actually that I know they were ultimately not successful in that purchase. And then additionally in Hollywood, at Hollywood and Highland, there is a mall that CIM Group owned that actually housed an LAPD substation there as well. And that location was an anchor point. So it was just interesting to see those connections in terms of, again, developers clearly being very happy with policing, wanting to be connected, and owning properties that even literally have LAPD substations within them. In the Hollywood Mall, they were actually funding that substation as well. Like they let them have the rent there for free, essentially. So yeah, so just making that connection as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and that, yeah, that number is, I'm glad you said free, but I think the number listed in the report is uh, like astonishing. It was like $10. I'm trying to find it.
I think it was
It's
a
just,
dollar
it was
or,
$1, yeah.
yeah.
But yeah, it just goes to show how closely they're working together. Um, and yeah, we talked about Monica Yamada briefly, who was you know who also served on the Hollywood Property Owners Alliance. And they're the two bids that the Hollywood Property Owners Alliance oversaw also had a track record for criminalizing lots of folks, particularly unhoused folks. We can read from the report, or I'll just read from the report over here. They were responsible. HPOA aggressively targeted unhoused people. The bid sometimes arrested unhoused people at rates higher than LAPD. And in 2013, they were responsible for more than 1% of all arrests made in the entire city of Los Angeles that year, even while working only 0.13% of the hours that the LAPD did. And so when we kind of pit that against the inundation of, uh, the South Central community and the constant harassment of Black people there, these bids are doing the same thing, a very similar tactic in another part of the city, right? And just that clear tie into CIM just goes to show that this is not only a concerted effort, but a joint agenda, the same playbook even. So that was really glaring for me personally. Any other questions or comments on that part?
Yeah, and I'll just add that something that we really attempt to do in that section is really like in talking about those wealthy white developers, to draw a contrast between that, that experience and that collaboration with policing, and essentially how, with these opportunity zones, those are essentially sent out in a brochure from the mayor of the city saying, hey, these opportunity zones are available. Why don't you invest in these properties? Whereas people that actually live there, Black residents that live there, who are attempting to also establish their own funds to invest in their own properties and grow their own businesses, are having to deal with the police on an everyday basis, having to fight back against the city attorney, having to fight back against people surveilling them, including people who are collaborating with police, and some of these gentrifiers and some of these wealthy landowners collaborating with police so that folks will be evicted. So something that we attempt to do in that section is to really contrast those experiences. So yeah.
Thank you, Tiff. So yeah, that's, unless folks have any more questions on CIM, they did try to buy the Crenshaw Mall, like Tiff said. They pulled their offer, and the Crenshaw Mall was eventually sold to David Schwartzman, who's another slumlord developer, landlord. Even though Downtown Crenshaw Rising did put up the largest bid for the mall, but obviously they continue to organize and fight back against that. But apart from focusing on opportunity zones and this effort to kind of seize land that's been deemed historically, I guess, like blighted or disenfranchised, we also focus on CSP sites. And so throughout the course of this report, we look at how corporations are often allow for these means of criminalization and violence to take place. So one of the things we talk about is the usage of Palantir that kind of facilitates, facilitated laser and Predpol while they existed, but now is an integral part of the new data-driven policing model, which is data-informed community-focused policing. And now Palantir was actually initially a donation by Target that came into place. And so these donations come through the Los Angeles Police Foundation, but they do come from corporations. And another one we look at the end of this report is by Goldman Sachs. who donates a sum of money um, for the development of a community safety partnership area. And so, Hamid, do you want to talk about CSPs a bit? I know you've been talking about community policing quite a bit. So,
Sure. So CSP stands for Community Safety Partnership, and this was a program that was launched by the city of LA, in partnership with the mayor's office, the LAPD, mayor's office of gang reduction grid, gang reduction and youth development, LAPD, and the Housing Authority of City of Los Angeles, HACLA. And the claim was that this basically it's built on this whole practice and concept of community policing, which goes back several decades, which really the claim there about community policing is that it's an idea, it's a concept, it's a tactic, it's a practice of building relationships in the community, and building trust with the community, and being actively engaged in the health and well-being of the community. Now that's, just to kind of just sort of not word by word, but that's basically what their claim is. But in reality, community policing is very much a part and parcel of this methodology that was developed by the U.S. military as a counterinsurgency tactic to control and contain and eliminate people who could be a threat to occupation. And of course, over the last 25 years, 30 years, since going back to early 1990s in Iraq, during Clinton's time, the U.S. Army has really just used this and we've all heard stories about the cash being flown into airplanes and local tribal chiefs. So that's basically what in the war zone, what is done is to build relationship with some of the leaders in the clergy, some of the civil, what is that term that is used for nonprofits? Civil society, and then also with faith leaders and other groups of people and business leaders. So that's just the overall kind of the framing of counterinsurgency and how occupying armies engage. So the LAPD literally took a page. I mean, not just they have built this thing post-Vietnam, that how the U.S. Army was building and destroying and murdering, but yet just staking its claim to pacify local communities and local populations. That's exactly how the LAPD has been building its quote unquote relationship, and it really went into overdrive starting in the 1990s. It's also something that we have seen over time, that how whenever people rise up and there's uprisings, that's a response that they come back with. So a long way of answering your question, Matios, but just to give a quick background on community policing and see where CSP fits. So the Community Safety Partnership kind of fits in that mold of engagement with the local community, which is where supposedly crime has been going on, where people are not feeling safe. So how do LAPD then go in and build that relationship, provide basketball coaching to youth, provide supposedly youth passages for youth to go and come back from schools, just have local sort of leaders in the community who can help facilitate conversations, who can help mediate conflict. So there's a lot of bullshit as if and I think what the issue here is that basketball coaches are all over the community, and just social workers are all over the community. Community knows how to survive and build its power. So that's where the Community Safety Partnership comes in. But one particular murder that also happened, that LAPD launched these things in housing projects in Jordan Downs and Nickerson Garden, and some other initially back in 2011, and now that has expanded. But speaking about Richard Risher, who was murdered in 16, I believe, if I'm remembering it correctly. There were this speaking to Richard Risher's mom, Lisa Richards, more recently as well, like, what we found was that it was apparently a CSP cop, because they're like supposedly specially trained people as well in building relationships in the community. So, and there's a whole bureau now the LAPD has started. So that's deep. It's also, is directly related, and I'll stop there, that is directly related to data-driven policing, because surveillance is one of the primary ways of monitoring the movement of people who can then be contained and controlled and criminalized. How this whole occupation and control of community, social control happens. So there's a lot of bullshit that goes on, but it's in details, and we'll cover that in section 6 when we get to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Hamid. Did folks have any questions or comments for Hamid? And Christopher, I see your comment here in the chat. Thank you so much for plugging in. And yeah, so all of this stuff, these laser zones and whatnot, the coalition found through public records requests, which got us mission sheets, and we were able to map 5 of the laser zones through those mission sheets. But our goal, we've since created a mapping work group led by our coordinating team member Chris, who developed automating banishment, the interactive map. We've created a work group to work on those spaces. And our goal is to map all of them, like all of the laser zones. So we'd love it if you could plug in. So yeah, even just talking about that, I love how you brought up how, they're stepping up surveillance and they're rationalizing it by, like, we're aiming to combat gun violence. And I think the coalition moves with the understanding that the intent with any surveillance is to do harm, right? And so this is, I know Hamid just talked about Richard Risher, but let me share my screen real quick. Just talking about these community safety partnership sites and what kind of their implementations and their manifestations were. I thought this was a really potent part of the report. Can folks see the screen? Okay, where they talk about, Harvard Park is also an opportunity zone, but CSP sites have also been testing grounds for LAPD surveillance, for example, with wireless cameras streaming live video to local cop cars at the Jordan Downs public housing complex. These cameras sites tell officers where youth may be gathering. In the case of Richard Risher, an 18-year-old Black youth killed by gang enforcement detail officers in the Nickerson Gardens, the cameras filmed Richard's murder, which, so with this deploy of trading, bullets for basketballs, like Hamid is saying, they readily install these surveillance technologies, they test out these surveillance technologies, and then, enact the harm that they always intended on enacting. But yeah, we'd love it if you could plug in, or if anybody wants to plug in that mapping group.
Yeah, Chris, thank you so much for sharing. I'm not sure if you go by Chris or Christopher. Chris, I'll go with Christopher, but okay. Chris, okay. Sorry, I'm just reading so yeah, I was just wondering about, like how, because I feel like that's still something that's not clear with LAPD in terms of like, how do they determine how do they track or map that gun violence? And we know like a certain extent of how they were doing that with Operation Laser with previous programs. We also know, about the existence of ShotSpotter, and that has been used by LAPD at different times. It's used by the LA Sheriff for a long time. But I don't know if you I don't know if you're able to talk any more about what you've been seeing up there, or what you're learning.
Yeah, I don't have too much to add. I'm just kind of at the beginnings of this, and kind of we've been sending out FOI requests, but my sense is that they have been manufacturing the crisis. They aren't using the data to combat gun violence as much as they're using a manufactured crisis around gun violence to justify more surveillance. So I think that's what's been going on over here.
Yeah, no, I would say that sounds exactly right. And Mamta, I see you have a comment in the chat as well. Did you, I don't know if you're able to.
Oh, sure. It was actually just to Christopher about Max Fort's work. I don't know if it's Forte or Fort, then in anthropology at Concordia, who's done quite a bit of work on this, on the complicity of anthropologists in the war state, and in particular providing sort of the analysis that we talk about in the report, how and with laser itself, right, like this whole the origin of all of this sort of uh, observation pathologizing of human behavior, and using that to come up with these theories around how to be more precise, and how to basically make gains for the settler state, right, and the imperial state. So anyway, yeah, it's kind of a side point, but I know he's done a lot of work on that, and written about it extensively. In particular, also about how anthropologists have used have been used as have given credence to like this whole idea of humanitarian intervention in Iraq and Syria and Libya and elsewhere.
Yeah, I don't want to derail the meeting or anything, but his work is really excellent, and he does a lot of work on the complicity of anthropology in the military-industrial complex. So, yeah, definitely interesting stuff, and also being interested in Aziz Chaudhry's stuff as well. That's been kind of looking at collective learning. That was part of the reason why I came to your meeting, was the learning aspect, and the way that you guys are sharing this information is just amazing. It's really inspiring work. So.
Thank you so much, Christopher. Chris, sorry. But yeah, we touch on kind of the complicity of anthropologists too, just even in our conversations around Predpol. Jeffrey Brantingham, in the anthropology department at UCLA, who is a co-founder of Predpol, also developed it, and UCLA being a major stakeholder. So it's not surprising, but also interesting to hear that there is a broader network of that, and I'd love to hear more. Yeah, and so we'd love it if you could plug in. And so, as with all of these findings, the work is still ongoing. Like I said, we're still working on mapping some of these other laser zones. We're still, putting PRAs through and getting more information. And just like, they kind of skew these narratives up in Canada, the LAPD does the same thing in order to justify the expansion of their police department, the continuation of their violence, and that comes through the guise of reform, which is the next section in this report. So, while these data-driven policing models have ended due in large part to the coalition's organizing and to the collective study and movement of community members who are deeply impacted, we fought to get rid of these programs. The LAPD just shows up and rolled out a couple years back a new program called Data Informed Community Focused Policing, which kind of marries this whole data-driven policing model with community policing, but is the same old bullshit, as we know. And so that's what we're fighting against now, and that's the next section of the report, which we'll cover another time. But this might be a neat little segue to do some updates on those work groups. And Tiff, I'll let you take it away if you want it.
Yeah, thanks so much. And actually, you actually provided a great segue. I think we're going to switch it up to our update about reform, because I think that we're going to be, I think Shakir may have to go a little earlier. So I think what we'll do is we'll just, we'll transition to a reform that we are pushing back on. Shakir, did you want to talk about that a bit more?
Sure. Yeah, I have to dip at 7:30. So yeah, thanks for letting me jump in. And I'm trying to find, Tim, if you have it handy, I'm just like trying to dig through my email to find the last after action thing where there was a note about that, but about the police advisory boards for surveillance, but I can just, I haven't been able to dig up, so I'll just, maybe it doesn't matter. I'll just,
And I'm sorry, folks. Welcome, Zarita, by the way. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much. Sorry I'm late. I thought it was 7.
Then in that case, you're pretty much on time. So thank you for joining.
Thank you so much.
And I'm
come
sorry.
back to that part and then and do some, like, maybe we can, if we want to hear from Zarita about her work and the CNAP stuff, or should we do it now?
Yeah, I mean, if you like, because Shakir, I know that you do also have to go as well. Do you want to give us that update? What do folks think? And Zarita, are you, are you pressed for time at all? We're just trying to think
Nope,
about.
I am not pressed for time. I'm yours.
Okay. Okay. Thank you again. Okay. So, yeah, so what we'll do, I think, is we'll just kind of continue, Shakir, if that makes sense for you, have you talk about that reform.
Okay.
And the creation of the CPAB and just what's that update from the coalition's perspective. And then perhaps we can welcome Zarita in and just talk a bit about her organizing experiences. And Matios, does that sound good? Okay, cool. Great. Okay, great. Why don't you go ahead, Shakir?
Cool. Yeah. So yeah, the thing we just wanted to kind of bring to people's attention and start thinking about together about how to respond is, so as part of the like kind of reform process that LAPD announced after the uprising in 2020, after the George Floyd uprising, was they kind of convened a whole bunch of these, like they kind of handpicked a couple sort of reform professionals, industry people, like people from the kind of policing surveillance industry, as well as kind of, community leaders that they sort of selected in that way, very much along the lines of what we were talking about earlier of kind of counterinsurgency and community policing, of like police kind of always picking like the individuals that they want to interact with and who they want to kind of be representatives of the community. So LAPD kind of, the police commission kind of formed all these advisory committees to come up with a slate of reforms that the police are now implementing. And one of the kind of committees that they formed around that was focused on kind of data and technology. And I mean, I think, one thing that just really stands out is, none of the people on that committee were anyone who's had any experience of policing or surveillance. Certainly in Los Angeles, I think it was like someone from a tech company, someone from like a hospital system or something, like a medical bureaucrat type person. And then the third person was this person named Brian Hofer, who runs a nonprofit in the Bay Area called Secure Justice that kind of works with different cities and different police departments to come up with like regulations governing surveillance. So, all of these kind of outside or, non-community folks were brought in to come up with these proposals. And so sure enough, the proposals they came up with and they presented are things, and we've been watching the police commission closely. So we saw when they presented very much things that police were kind of very excited about and embracing. And so the one that we want to talk about today is, we've been talking about community policing and the kind of longer history of how, the police are always creating these like advisory boards or community boards that they can use as kind of a buffer to say, oh, we're listening to the community, we're hearing from the community, but really are just kind of providing cover for their violence and are just kind of, just a way like to kind of absorb the shock of criticism rather than to actually do anything about it. And so one of like literally taking that community advisory board model, what they've said is they want to create a specific advisory board whose role is to kind of advise LAPD and the police commission on what to do about new technologies. And so that's like, so say if they're trying to adopt some kind of new technology, right now, that happens in a couple ways. Either like the police just go out and buy it, or it's donated. Oftentimes, technologies are donated from the police foundation. We know that the Palantir data mining system was donated to LAPD by Target, the stores. And then over time, also then they put things in their budget. So that happens to the budget process. But this would basically add just kind of one more layer of kind of like just advisory capacity to the police commission of people who, would, I think, we don't even know anything about the composition of the board or what the model is. But basically that's like kind of the proposed solution in response to really, organizing by us, by so many other kind of community groups over the years to say, like we talked about how we dismantled Operation Lasers and these other programs. People have been demanding like an end to these programs. Instead, what they're kind of creating is this advisory board to help guide and create a stamp of community approval on the stuff that they want to do. So that's just kind of in the works. And what we've been thinking about doing is kind of mobilizing some kind of, or mounting some kind of response, even just speaking up to it at the commission. And so before we do that, wanted to kind of just share it with the group and see if people here have any kind of, what that, even just hearing the basic contours of that proposal, what that makes you think about, and what, seems like a problem about that you might, that we should, like, how should we criticize that? Opening it up in case, I think we're going to start probably drafting some kind of sign-on letter or statement, but wanted to get people's input on what the critique of that program could be.
Yeah, I think a really easy one is that it doesn't appear as though like serious community members were involved at all. Like, which that isn't to say that would sanitize or make any of this permissible or allow for any type of oversight, but I would attack the sham of real community input in any way. And I think the coalition does that, especially when naming, Brian Hofer and the like. But that's something that kind of rubs me the wrong way.
Okay, well, Mahesh, what if they say, all right, well, listen, we'll put a bunch of really cool people on there. Like, we'll make sure to put like one good person on there. So because I think, what would we say then?
Yeah, so, even I think the LAPD and police in general have this really great way of in the sense of like, I think taking it back to like the appeal of community members, I think just naming the fact that no one asked for community oversight over surveillance, right? So it's the conversation, the calls from community members was defunding the police, abolishing the police, and just taking it back there. And just so even saying like, community members weren't involved in this process, community members didn't ask for this, might be a good place to take it. But is that an okay answer?
No, I like that. Yeah, it's not. I mean, I know it was a kind of trick question because you were saying more about the process that generated this stupid idea more than like what the board would look like. And I think especially if it comes out of the uprising where, like you said, the slogans were really clearly defund the police and fuck the police. No one was saying like, let's create a community advisory board to, regulate the technology used by police. And so, and I think, pointing to like the composition of who came up with that as an example of it's not at all representative of what people are actually asking for. And I see Tiff, you're also saying, yeah, the model is kind of failing in Oakland already. And yeah, that's a good point. I didn't share that, but that was for the place where it was piloted, and literally the same dude who's coming here to Brian Hofer, who's coming here to promote it, has in public otherwise criticized the Oakland model as a failure, not working, and we should have known better. Then he's coming here and, hired by LAPD to promote that same model here. Other thoughts on kind of how to frame the critique of this?
I just have just a small comment. It just seems as though that it's just job security. If you already know it's failing in one city and you're being paid to come here and promote it to our city when you already know it's a failure, the question is, stop wasting more of our money. That's why we want you to fund it, so you don't continue to waste our money. And give us things we don't need, we don't ask for, and that's not really helping while you secure your future. That's basically, my comment on that.
No, that's exactly right. Yeah, and I think we should kind of forefront that. Like, we've been like, I remember when we first saw him, our first reaction was like, this is just like a scammer. Like, he's just like being hired by like police to come and just like pull the scam that he himself kind of knows failed there, and that we know is deadly for people, that if he experienced that, he would also know that. And then also we kind of talk about, and this even is like kind of how we see, or have been kind of starting to think about community policing even more broadly, is that a lot of this stuff you can think of as like, these are like infiltrators, that in the past, we all know the history of kind of how the police state, like COINTELPRO and stuff, how the police state like really hires physical infiltrators, informants, assassinates political leaders, all with the goal of dividing and sowing division within movements, diverting movement energy, all of that. And in a way, these kinds of, like a reform consultant hired to like come up with the bullshit like reform proposal that no one wants, or to create a board that like can maybe use some of the language, can claim to represent the community but isn't. We also need to see that as a form of infiltration, because it's having the same effect of like, taking this kind of energy that's calling to abolish the police, that's insurrectionary, that's kind of insurgent and just rebellious and like actually opposing the system, and then using that, diverting that into, okay, well, yeah, that's cool, yeah, here's how we're going to do that. That's is very similar effect to kind of that infiltration.
I think if I could suggest also that our call and our thing should be very clear about, just completely rejecting, and based upon the work that we've been doing, and from there look at that this whole purpose of creating an oversight board is just a smoke and mirror. I mean, at least, how we craft that in the letter. The message needs to be very clear about rejecting it, not even give them any inch about like, maybe just like, there's a different community or a better community or anything like that, which not that we are saying that. But I think they are now, and this is this broader expansion of community policing programs, that this by itself is so fundamentally flawed by design, that it serves a purpose. So I'm looking forward to how this letter gets crafted, but to be very direct about, and then try to get as many organizations and people to sign on to that.
Yeah, cool. And I see also what Tiff said, that it's condescending, that the board is the experts. And again, that's not the experts on the harm or the impact. That's the experts on like how to do more policing, how to do more surveillance and police technology. Yeah.
Yeah, and I just added that because it's like that's something that Brian Hoffer specifically has raised, like in a podcast he was doing with the LAPD, whatever he's called, Mark Smith. He's the OIG. He's the Inspector General. Yeah. And saying that, you need essentially that people like him exist because they should, it can't be left to like a layperson, he calls them a layperson, to be making these decisions or be thinking about this policy, or to be like looking at body cam video, for instance. He's saying, no, that you want that to be reviewed by someone who's an expert in these things. So it's just very dismissive of the community's experiences. And again, this is someone who does not even live here, has never been impacted by LAPD policing. So, yeah.
Yeah. And that actually also another point that I hadn't really thought of including in this, but I think it fits, is like when you're talking about this expertise, like oftentimes these people will say like, oh, like the technology is like too complicated, or the policy issues are too complicated for people to understand. And, it's technical, it's algorithms and all this stuff. And that's why we need all these like experts flown in to tell you how it works. And I think that's a good place to lift. And maybe this is also kind of what Hamid was getting at, is like that, no, like our work, the Stop LAPD Spying's work is actually kind of is a real demonstration of, no, like the community does understand this stuff better than anyone. And that we have a really, really detailed, comprehensive, like down to the technical details and exactly who's being impacted and how and what exactly it's looking like, better than kind of the audits from the Inspector General or from what the police commission has any sense of anything. And so it just gives lie to this idea that, no, like the people can understand it, you need to hire experts for it. It's like, no, we actually here, if you read our stuff, like we kind of have a more detailed and rich understanding of the stuff than anyone else. Okay. So I'm just taking notes for so we can start working on this. And we're also, I think, going to be trying to continue this conversation a little bit at the event that we're doing about community policing on Thursday night, which I think there's probably going to be plugging the flyer for that and stuff soon. But if folks here, if you're around, it's at LAPD headquarters. We're pulling up to screen a video and kind of have just night of discussion and performances and art and stuff. Anything else on this point before we go back?
Thank you so much for covering all of that with us.
Cool. No, thanks everyone for the input.
That was awesome.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So with that, I think we'll move on and welcome Zarita again. Welcome Pancake to the conversation. So I think what we'll do is we can kind of circle back, because I know a big thing that we wanted to talk about tonight was we did want to be talking with Zarita and to be learning more about her experiences. So we kind of, and Zarita, just to catch, and I'm sorry, my name is Tiff, I use they, them pronouns. I'm a member of the Stop LAPD Spying Coalition, a member of our Fight Against Data-Driven Policing, and we're really glad to have you joining with us this evening. And so we did a lot of, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I said, thank you.
Thank you. So we did a lot of talking in the first part already about kind of what is covered in section 5 of the report. So I'm not sure how we want to structure it now, Matios, if you all just want to kind of have some conversation, or I'm not sure, Zarita, of your familiarity with the report either, of the automating banishment, which I know we don't really care too much about that part at all, but
yeah, we can provide that context. But yeah, I think even just to kick it off, I know Zarita's a friend. I've gotten organized with her in many spaces, but Zarita, if you could tell these people just how phenomenal you are and how many spaces you lead in.
Oh my God. Well, I started out with creating a tenant association here at my apartment, which is Chesapeake Apartments, front of the LA Times on Wednesday, press conference on Thursday on Channel 5. I've kind of been blowing them up over the last few years because they haven't gotten any better. But my complex is 425 units sitting over here off of Obama on Chesapeake, across from Dorsey High. We're sitting on 17 acres, and there's about a 105 buildings clustered together. So that's where we live. And then from there, when we started going through a nuisance abatement lawsuit, and of course, it's the same story that you guys are familiar with. You criminalize the tenant so you can come in and do what you want. And the first thing they did was call all of us cocaine salespeople and gangsters in order for them to set the stage for this nuisance abatement lawsuit. And so with that, at first we thought the lawsuit was about habitability issues, and we were all happy. And then when we found out what it was really about, then we're like, no. But by the time that we really got wind of it and understood the momentum, they had already gone to court and had passed quite a few things upon us. And one of them was to put 762 cameras on the property that were all direct feed to LAPD. That's the first thing that they wanted to do. And it was aiming at everyone's front and back doors. And we're like, absolutely not. So we grabbed some lawyers from the Legal Aid Foundation, the Tenants Association, intervened into this lawsuit to make a story really, really short. And we won a few things. And so, one, there's no nuisance abatement on the property. Two, they weren't able to massively evict all of us by trying to force us to sign these new rules and regulations that were just over policing in its nature. And then those 762 cameras really became 156. And it was only on the outside grounds. It was only on our cars. It was on the entry gates to the property, because that's where the problems are. They're not with the tenants. They're people that come onto the property and cause mayhem that the tenants are blamed for. So that was one. Two, anyone over the age of 12 would have needed to have an ID, a California ID that needed to be photographed and put on file at the management office in order for them to come visit us. So that was completely out of the question. Here you are having 12-year-olds needing an ID so they can start their process early. So we fought against that. So that's no longer one of the premises. And there's no direct feed to LAPD. So that was really important for us. Bringing us forward, from that work, I not only started with the Los Angeles Tenants Union, so I founded the Baldwin Lamertz Crenshaw Local. From that, I did a lot of work with ACE, mostly going onto the buses to Sacramento to yell at our politicians for the stupid things that they were doing and allowing to let happen. I learned a lot of lobbying about that. Then I became, with some more of the work, vice chair of Liberty Community Land Trust. And also I work with the Right to Counsel in Homelessness Now, and quite a few other coalitions. And I've made a tremendous amount of relationships, like Matio's here. And we all try to work together to solve the same problem, because it's criminalizing the lowest of the income of the individuals, criminalizing those that have been disenfranchised for years. I don't really recite this very often, but I happen to be a taillight felon, because, it only takes a bulb and a taillight to be out for things to snowball when you don't have, the means or the funds or the transportation or whatever the case may be to be put on probation. So, it snowballed, and it's just hard. Just recently with my, press conference last week, I noticed that there's this van spying on us, and it looked like a 2022. I mean, actually, and it had all this gear on top, and it was watching us creeping by. And then, of course, even after everything was all over, it was parked outside of, you know, my driveway where I live. So it's one of those things where when we go full circle, you see what they're doing. You know, they have to label us. You know, they create a problem that they then have to solve. And one of the issues, I just went to Ralph's on La Brea and Obama last night just to grab some popsicles. It was kind of hot. And so I'm looking at the entire parking lot. All of the lights are out. The only lights are the 4 lights around the LAPD spying trailer. So there's no lights on Ralph's. There's no lights on in front of Ralph's. There's no lights. All of the other lights of the parking lot was actually turned out. So what kind of issue are you creating that you have to come solve? Is my issue. So, you know, I kind of filmed that last night because, you know, the first thing I did was, of course, I stuck it on my Twitter. You know, this is what's going on in our community. Are they trying to create another problem for them to solve, to utilize monies that can go for something else? So with that, I'm going to stop. And if there's any other direction you want me to go in, you know, I'm happy to do that. But, you know, it's just the criminalizing not only of the homeless people, but everyday people that are in their apartments, paying their rent, you know, minding their own business in order so they can get the advantage to do what they want.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Zarita. And yeah, if folks have any questions for Zarita, please type it into the chat and I'll read them aloud.
Oh, great, because I can't see where to lick.
No. I'll leave it roughly. Oh, thanks so much, Chris. Sorry you've got a dip. And you know, it really bums me out to hear that, you know, y'all were excited when you first heard that there was a suit.
Yeah.
Thought it was addressing living conditions. And yeah, I think this is something that Nee has brought up in the past, that a lot of the times when these CNAPs are put in place, it's locations where resources are, you know, being withheld. And so here comes you know, the LAPD, who whips out crazy resources just to criminalize folks like that, you know. And I'm glad that you brought up that, like, there are problems, like community violence is a real thing. But the LAPD's response to that was, let's look at the tenants. Let's look at the people living here who are impacted by this community violence. Let's criminalize them. So that really stuck out for me.
One of the things that was really instrumental is when they brought this suit. Supposedly they had all of this evidence. Oh, we've made 11 cocaine sale buys on the property, and the excuse that the owner was using to tow away cars that, you know, may have been in disrepair was that we were using them as meeting places to sell our drugs. Or so all of those cars got towed away at the expense of the owners that probably may not have been able to repair them right away. Then, of course, the barbecue pits, you know, and this is something we've been hearing about that's going on with a lot of properties. They want to throw away the barbecue pits. Well, that's used as a drop zone for your drug trades, which is really stupid. You know, so what were the kids' bicycles that you guys were throwing away used for? And, you know, for example, I had a hub around and a mobility scooter. What was that used for you to unlock that and throw that away? But what I found out is that they use dehumanizing attributes and they throw things out there to make you less of who you are. So instead of us being a bunch of hardworking, you know, laborers or people that have, you know, blue collar, white collar jobs and work for the government, you just disregard our human, at the human aspect of us, and you reduce us to whatever you say. And then when we started to dissect the accusations, we realized that majority of the drug buys that they were talking about didn't actually happen on the property. They happened at 7-Eleven a block away, and a couple of them happened in front of another property, a large property owned by John L. Jones. That's not even on our property. So then you examine, okay, you're down to 3, and you find out that the people that actually came onto the property and made this transaction weren't even tenants here. They were people that were able to walk onto the property freely or cut through, the property going from one street to another. And so, that really, really kind of opened my eyes to, how, they label us in order to mistreat us or to criminalize us in order to do what they want with us, our property, and of course to remove our rights.
Yeah, thank you for that, Sarita.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, do folks have anything they want to add or any questions?
Yeah, I just have a quick question. Thank you, Zarita. Thank you very much for making the time.
Sure.
And I am familiar with that lawsuit, and talking to Sheila, and just looked at some of the papers as well. The LAPD, obviously, in that settlement was they got a lot of access to the complex as well, and they were installing various types of surveillance equipment too. What is the current status? I mean, there was also this thing about for them to publish through CNAP, they do get keys to enter the complex itself. But what have you seen over the last 12 months or 2 years or so since a lot of these different things? My understanding is that license plate readers were installed along with facial recognition cameras. And then there were other types of things that Motorola had some contracts. So yeah, just wanted to see what the landscape looks like.
Well, since the actual lawsuit, it's been about 3.5 years. And so it was dismissed by agreement. And so with the agreement, we did tone things down. They wanted armed security. We didn't want the armed security. We wanted people that we can see that was patrolling in uniform, not someone that was driving their personal vehicle with tinted windows, all in black with the lights out. We didn't want that. And so, they had to give us a little restitution for some of the things that they had done. And a lot of it had to do with habitability and the falsehoods that they were telling about throwing our barbecue pits away and things of that nature. So, it was 3 years worth of free laundry, for all the tenants, for 36 months. And then, of course, they had to reinstate barbecuing on the property. So the way they did it is the city made them build us actual gas and brick barbecues to let them know that this is not something that's illegal. We do have our own individual pits. We just can't leave them outside anymore. So all of us have ours in our apartment. They did, give a little restitution, which wasn't really much. It was $50 gift card for everybody that had a pit thrown away. And a lot of us, we had either the small Webers or the expensive, gas grills, stainless steel, and those people are the ones that really lost. We were able to not have them sell the property, Ellis the property, or evict all of us massively like they were trying to do with the newer leases. So that helped a little bit. But what we found out is then they had to also fix the issues that were wrong. And the city kind of waived their legal fees for them to fix the issues that were wrong. But, as of last week, we're still having raw sewage back up into sinks, and we're still having the pestilence and the other problems that we had before. So they just waited until everything died down and they were back to their old shenanigans. So I'm back to my old shenanigans too.
We love to hear that, Sarita.
Yeah, but we were really kind of deceived because saving them the money on the cameras, we kind of saved them quite a bit of money. They wanted to literally fence the property completely all the way around, with these wrought iron fences and with the spikes on top. And, that was unsightly in itself. And what we found out is even the fire department to do a rescue couldn't even get in. So when they first did this, it's like the ambulance is coming to try to rescue someone and they can't even get in the building. So we had a lot of hiccups, but there's a lot of falsehoods too, because it looks like it's locked, but it's really not. So there's a false, sense of security here. They're not maintaining everything. The washing machines are broken, yada, 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 yada. It's still the same thing. They're still who they are. They want to overcharge the tenants for every single thing, and they don't want to repair anything. And the conditions are still here, but now we have the increased surveillance on top of all of this.
Thank you, Sarita.
You're welcome.
And it's the same landlord, Nudger, I believe.
Oh yes, he's still alive
Oh
and
my
well.
gosh.
After a few FBI investigations and a few deaths from ill-repaired properties, they changed their name to Regency Management at the beginning of 2020. But they're still the same people, and they're still trying to get people to sign these, these false, these leases and these rental agreements with ridiculous restrictions. And the latest lie was, you won't get your ERAP if you don't sign this lease because our old name was Palma and our new name is Regency. Well, that's not true either, because the address is still the same, and that wasn't even an issue with the ERAP program. But a lot of people did fall for the okie doke and sign the new lease.
That's awful to hear.
Yeah. But we're still cranking away. So, we have a strategy meeting coming up in a couple of days, so we can hit them every which way, like they're hitting us.
Yeah, and I want to cover that fight back a little bit more, even on a bigger scale, touching on like downtown Crenshaw and our work with Reclaim Black LA. But I was thinking about the fact that, so in part 5 of this report, we talk about, racial terror and the LAPD laser zones, which was a data-driven policing model, designated this area as a crime area effectively. And what that felt like for folks was inundating it with police, constant harassment, like field interview cards being filled out nonstop. And I remember you mentioned that 12-year-olds were required to have IDs in your complex, and I can't help but think that's for that same reason, to better gather information on them. So I guess my question, my question,
was definitely.
Yeah, so I was just wondering what police presence was like within the complex, like what the experience of youth was like, how often were people harassed or?
Well, at first it was a lot of while the lawsuit was actually pending, from the time that I got involved to the settlement, it was like 10 months, but it really started a couple of months prior to me even understanding what was going on. But your question was about their presence. They were driving through the parking areas. And, our parking areas are not something where you can drive in one way and out the other. They're just, they're shaped like E's. So you got to drive through, back up, drive through. And, they were driving through, but we had established earlier on with the district attorney's office, they didn't even want us to come outside. They didn't want the kids to play. They didn't want us to barbecue. They didn't want us to even sit down and enjoy the grassy areas, But I had to bring that human factor back. And I told him, I said, well, our backyards are our backyards. I said, don't you, when you go to your house or you have a barbecue with your friends, don't you sip a beer outside with your barbecue? Don't you have an ice chest sitting there? Well, we do the exact same thing. And so they had to roll back a lot of stuff that they were asking. Oh, no drinking outside, no this, no that. And I'm like, well, I always accompany my barbecues with wonderful cases of, Angry Orchard beer. That's what I serve my guests. I said, so what are you saying now that this is impossible? I have to go somewhere else? And they're like, well, no, I guess not. And then we're looking at, the new regulations that the owner was trying to put on about no smoking. You can't smoke on the property. And if we catch you thumping a cigarette butt, that's immediate grounds for terminating your lease without going to court or whatever. And I was like, that really doesn't make any sense, because half of our tenants are the ones that mop the hallways, water the lawns, planted the rose bushes. And this is a ridiculous thing that you're doing. You're acting as if we don't take care of the property by whatever notion that you just decided you wanted to either hear from the owners or create. And he says, well, we don't want any marijuana smoking. And then he had to pull back and say, well, wait a minute, marijuana is legal. I guess we can't say that either. And so they just rolled everything back, but they had to hear themselves say it to know how stupid they sound, how stupid, these notions are, or what's good for you at your house isn't good for me at my house where I pay rent. And so we, like I said, we just had to open their eyes and put that human factor on there and say, well, we don't want to be harassed. And, our kids have jumpers too. That was one of the big takeaways from that. And so, no, I don't see that much of a police presence anymore. They don't drive through the property. I haven't seen them do that in a couple of years now. But what it kind of boiled down to, it's not as bad as you said it was. That's what it was. It's not as bad as you said it was, or the owner said it was, or whatever story you wanted to make up in your head to justify what you were doing to us.
Yeah. And so, yeah, that's really fascinating to hear. And, as I'm hearing you talk about it, I'm thinking about like all the other complexes and all the other locations that didn't have organizers like you, or communities like you that could assert their humanity to the state in this way and like insist on, getting their rights. Yeah, any questions for Zarita? Comments on anything?
I just wanted to add that there was a lot of your literature floating around in my meetings. Someone brought some LAPD anti-spying coalition. And that's when I first heard and saw it. And I used to pass it out, but I didn't know any of you. And then, of course, the YJC came and helped. And one of the things that we were trying to implement was a program to expunge the records of some of the people that live there. So, they can move forward without having, whatever this stigma was carrying them around about a mistake that may not have even been a real mistake, or even being a taillight felon like myself.
Yeah, and I see Tiff saying, oh, go ahead, Tiff.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think, Benny, I don't know if you feel like sharing, and that's okay if not, but in your introduction, you did note that you were a member of Youth Justice Coalition as well. But yeah, we're glad that you saw that literature. That's really awesome. So we're excited to hear that. Yeah, and then I had a question for you, Zarita, just in terms of, as Matios was saying, thinking about those, not everybody would have been able to engage in that type of organizing, and just thinking how have you seen the area change over time, like in terms of folks like being displaced or leaving the area?
Well, they continue to evict people, very quietly, very discreetly, not the same manner in which, they were doing before. But you still see that people are changing hands, moving trucks are going. One of the most unfortunate things is we realized that as this process was going, the price of the rents were going up. So smack dab in the middle of this. The $1,000 apartment went to $1,500 to $1,600, and currently a one bedroom is sitting at $2,000. And so we know what they were trying to utilize. I guess you can say this lawsuit in their favor. So it was all a big, it's just horrible to stop and think about it. They're willing to maim people's lives in order to make more money. So you got the gentrification, you have the over policing, and using the police as a tool so they can get people out, so they can make more money. And it's just a vicious cycle and circle. And they're willing to do whatever it takes, make up stuff, fabricate. And then when that didn't work, they used other tactics that, they used the social services that I thought was really, really interesting. I got a call about a year or two ago, and they're like, Zarita, what's going on at your apartment? We've gotten 22 calls that, parents are mistreating their children, and we've taken 19 children away. And then they found out that they were all false reports, and they were coming from the manager. And so, this person was still employed. This is, if you can take and threaten the parents, or they get tired, or just don't want to be harassed, and they pick up and move, you've actually accomplished what you wanted. So there's a lot of tricks that they're using. The police and the policing is just one of them. It's just unfortunate what I've seen while doing this work.
Yeah, that sounds awful, horrible. And, we've been talking about, the name of the report is Automating Banishment, which is no coincidence, because I think we understand, these laser zones, these CNAPs.
And I see the report. I just didn't get a chance to look at all the juicy parts.
Oh, no. You know all the juicy parts, Arita. We're trying to hear that from you, and we're so glad
I live those juicy parts.
Exactly. So we're so glad to have you here. But again, understanding that, their objective is to push us out of our communities. And just even looking at what happened with the Crenshaw Mall. I know you've done work with downtown Crenshaw, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm still trying to get over that one.
Yeah. But even knowing that, with all these obstacles, even after CIM pulled out, and David Schwartzman put his bid in, and we had the biggest bid on the table, like,
yes,
I think it's important to note that, there's still an ongoing fight for Black autonomy, which, you're on the forefront of, not even just with the tenants unions, but I was hoping you could talk about the Liberty Community Land Trust and securing.
Oh, sure. Yeah, one of the reasons why I was a little bit late is I was doing a UCLA lecture for some of their students. It's regarding what the Community Land Trust does. And what we do is we try our very best when we purchase these buildings. It's phenomenal how many people know real estate, but they don't understand the intricacies of a land trust. And, whenever I don't know if any of you own homes or whatever, but when you look at your tax bill, you see the amount of the buildings, plus the amount of the land, and then they tax you. So what we do is when we purchase those buildings, we split those two items in to two separate owners. So the land is actually owned by the Community Land Trust, and we put the buildings temporarily in an LLC in order so once the tenants are ready, that they can purchase that or make it into a co-op. And it's in the LLC only during the stages in which we're doing the rehab, because a lot of these buildings are in very, very bad and poor conditions, and they have to be repaired. So we've done some very extensive repairs on our property, and we don't kick those costs back to the tenants. And whoever's in the building when we purchase it are grandfathered in. So we do whatever we can to make it so that that person can stay and not be displaced. They don't have to fear displacement if Liberty Community Land Trust buys their building. And so I don't announce this very much because you could imagine, but we do have an opportunity that if we see someone that's in a unit that's paying $1,000 a month and their Social Security is only $1,100, we actually have the ability to lower that person's rent to, and not need anything back. It's all in the numbers. And so the goal is, we don't want the person that's making the $50,000 a year or to be jealous that we lowered their rent and not the other one. It's all about equity. It's all about, how much they have left to buy their food and pay their utilities once their rent is paid. So, that's an aspect we don't really talk about. Because of course, everybody's going to want to move into a community land trust and lower my rent, please. It's in the numbers. And we try to make it so that little old lady that's on Social Security, that's already done her 30 years and doesn't have another 30 years to go back to work, can live a life that she's not stressed out and paying the majority of her income in rent. So, and it's on a 99-year ground lease. Once the transition happens and the tenants are actually in ownership or in co-op with their units, they do have the option to not only let their children and their children's children hang on to that. And that's how you build that generational wealth, when you don't have to worry about where you sleep.
Yeah, and
with your rent not going up every single year. Just think about how much rent goes up every year. And now, even with the new laws, it's capped at 7.5%. So that means instead of, we were having 3% after 2008, right? Rents were only going up 3% with rent stabilized units. Now the new law, it's 7%. So we've stopped that. There's none of that with Liberty. We don't need it.
Yeah, and it's so reaffirming and exciting to hear that there's somebody, I don't have a grasp on the numbers, Arita, just keeping it a buck with you, but
no worries.
It feels good to know that, there's someone ensuring that, Black LA will stay in place and securing our roots, fighting against that banishment that we're talking about. Hamid's got his hand up.
Oh, yes, please.
Yeah, no, just reminded me about the material that you were talking about. I just remember earlier on in the meetings by just on this side of Dorsey, there was this baseball batting cage over there as well, where you folks would be meeting. So I don't know if you remember that. That's where I remember bringing the Stop LAPD Spying Coalition material and passing it around.
That was you. Thank you.
Yeah. And then also speaking about, I remember just about the stalker state and the architecture of surveillance. So a lot of hums and haws getting out of that, which leads me to a question here, Zarita, about building knowledge and collective learning as well, because one of the things we do want to do, and this is again honoring our family at YJC, that we want to start also, they've always offered us to hold space there and invite the community to have community conversations on the police state and how deep this police state is and all the different intricacies and the ways data is collected and people are surveilled and contained and controlled and monitored and traced and tracked. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of just just kind of toss it on to you. There's would love to continue building and bring this deep knowledge to the community and help us together unpack some of this bullshit and how do we build that power on the ground. So
I would actually love for you to come and talk to some of the tenants. We're not fully what do you call that? We're not fully off of Zoom yet, even with the BLC. Even our meeting on Thursday is actually going to be online because we just can't find a place big enough. We don't know how many tenants are going to show up, but we got at least a quarter of them, which is over 100. So it has to be on Zoom. Thank God I have one that does 300. But I want that. That was something that I had originally wanted to do within the concerned community members for Chesapeake Apartments, which is the name of the Tenants Association. And that is to bring other community leaders in to share the knowledge that they have, and bring their literature in, and give these informational sessions and workshops, because it's just so important. And before I did this work, I never knew there was a 130 plus Black organizations all within the community, ran by Black and brown and BIPOC folks. And I saw little tidbits of them, but I never really just saw them full-fledged. And I really appreciate the relationships that I've made and the knowledge that I've gained, and just the sharing that we do. And yes, I would love that tremendously.
Cool. Well, yeah, we're coming up on the end of the webinar.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for that, Zarita. And I have so many other questions for you, so I'm a little bummed out. But yeah, I think I'd also like to invite you to the coalition is hosting a teach-in, and we'd love you, all the folks in your tenants union, to come through.
Sure.
Conversation about community policing and how we kind of view that as counterinsurgency. And I know when we were talking about the CPAB, the tech CPABs with Shakir earlier, this oversight of surveillance, you had talked about how it is infiltration, how it is infiltrating our communities. And so we're kind of viewing community policing in a similar vein. So Thursday night, I'll send you the flyer to that, but
Okay.
everybody on the webinar, not just Zarita, but we'd love you all to come along. But thank you so much for plugging in with us, for joining us, for sharing this wealth of information. We hope you'll come back, just because I haven't had enough personally, and I don't think the rest of the people on this.
Well, wonderful. I'd love to come back, and I'll get the time right this time.
Whatever time you show up is good for us. I'm grateful to have you.
And I wasn't even supposed to be speaking on the last one. They saw my face and just threw me in. I was like, oh, I wasn't prepared.
I think I may be one of the few people that appreciates just how busy you are, Zarita.
It's all good. It's all good.
Packed schedule.
It's all good. It's wonderful to be welcomed.
Thank you, Zarita. Yeah, so I'll open it up if folks have any other announcements.
Yeah,
Well, just to, I'm so sorry. No, I was just gonna, yeah, go ahead, Tiff, go ahead.
Okay. I was just going to invite folks to join our working group for the fight against data-driven policing. So of course, this is the fourth Tuesday is when we have this community meeting, but we do have working groups that are doing all of the things that we've been talking about today as well. We do have one monthly Monday night working group where we all come together, and then we have smaller groups as well. So if folks are interested in getting more information about those or joining one of those, please send us an email at stoplapdspying@gmail.com, and we'll get you plugged into that. So that was it. Please go ahead, Hamid.
Oh yeah, no, I was just gonna also have folks save the date for May 17th, which is a Tuesday, 6 o'clock in the evening. We're going to be having a town hall at the Robinson Space in Little Filipino Town about social media in the police state. So social media, which is one of the primary ways that how people are constantly being traced and tracked and monitored, and how their analysis leads to deep criminalization of people. So Zarita, it's more or less like this whole metadata concept, that how they identify one person, and through there, they build these whole networks, almost like veins into the community to go after other people as well. So it is, this is a huge fight, and we want to build that ground power, but we want to bring that information to the community. So that's on May 17th, on Tuesday. Yeah, and then this coming Thursday, of course, day after tomorrow at 7 p.m., we're meeting in person outside LAPD headquarters to have a conversation. So it's in the open space. So have a conversation on community policing and how this is really a military type operation of occupying armies around counterinsurgency. So yeah, that was just a couple of announcements.
That's awesome. And you know what the funniest thing is, that reminds me, I think I was part of one of these police oversight commissions years ago. And I was also privy to meet the gentleman that actually made the facial recognition software that's on the body cams. And the actual programmer said that it didn't work on African Americans because it gives them a false narrative, a false read, you know. And I'm like, then why are they still using them? You know, why are you continuing to use something that you know that has a fault against a certain population? We know why, but you know, that came from the actual programmer, and I thought that was really interesting. I used to be a programmer, so I was speaking his jargon.
Wow. Yeah, I'm sorry, Matias. I think you were going to say something there.
No, yeah, we know why. You said it all, Zarita, and so that's kind of a bummer, but not surprising at all. Yeah, I also wanted to, if it was cool with everybody else, while we're on the topic of community policing, kind of drop a link to the zine the community policing work group has been working on, which kind of chronicles the history of community policing as counterinsurgency through the lens of different LAPD police chiefs in the past century. So I think we plan on kind of premiering it on Thursday, but it's out on the site now. So if folks want to check it out, please do. Yeah. The artist Quincy Clemens is a member of BLMLA. He's incredible. We also had a lot of input and work from our coordinating team member, Jason. So really grateful to those two for this. But yeah, come check us out on Thursday. There's going to be food and live performances. And yes, you've got a link here, Zarita.
Yeah, I just wanted to share that link where police went out there and impersonated a gang so they can arrest protesters and accuse them of being in that gang. So I just thought more waste of funds and entrapment and criminalizing innocent people. So I just thought that's the latest.
It never ceases to surprise me how shameless they are criminalizing folks. But yeah, if folks don't have any other announcements, I think that's all I got. Tiff, on it.
Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah, it's 8:06. So we really appreciate folks hanging in there with us. We're so glad that you could join with us, Sarita, and we look forward to continued conversations.
Thank you. Me too.
Right on. But yeah, I think that's it, folks. I hope everybody has a good rest of the evening, and we look forward to Thursday and everything else going on this week. Look forward to seeing folks soon.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Zarita. Thank you, Tiff.
All right. Thanks, Matthew.